Good morning, family and friends. The power of prayer. God delivers. Acts 12, 1 through 24. We find in verses 6 through 10, and when Herod was about to bring him out, that night Peter was sleeping, bound with two chains between two soldiers, and guards before the door were keeping the prison. Now behold, an angel of the Lord stood by him, and a light shone in the prison. And he struck Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, Arise quickly. And his chains fell off his hands. Then the angel said to him, Gird yourself and tie on your sandals, and so he did. And he said to him, Put on your garment and follow me. So he went out and followed him, and did not know that what was done by the angel was real, but he thought he was seeing a vision. When they were past the first and second guard gates, they came to the iron gate that leads to the city, which opened to them on its own accord. And they went out and went down one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. Here we are, face to face now with the mystery of God exercising his sovereign will. It is his will that Peter be delivered from prison, and it was also his will that James was not delivered, that James would die. There is a contingency that believes that the reason James died is that his faith was not as strong as Peter. I tend to differ with that theory. And speaking of faith, the author of Hebrews says in chapter 11, beginning at verse 32, And what more shall I say? For the time will fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trials of mockings and scourgings, yes, of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sown in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and dens and caves in the earth. And all these, having attained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. It was not that Peter's faith was greater. It was that God's will was different for James than it was for Peter. Peter was delivered from prison, but James was delivered into a life in the presence of the Lord after resurrection. It was as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered when threatened with the fiery furnace by King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 3 and 15. Who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? They responded by saying, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, of our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. Daniel 3, 16 through 17. They said in effect that God would either deliver them from the fiery furnace or through the fiery furnace, but either way, God would deliver them. God delivers. Verse 6 says, And when Herod was about to bring him out that night, that is the night before he was to be executed. Why do you think that God waits to the last minute to deliver? Because he's not going to deliver us as long as we have strength and means to save ourselves. In order for the angel to deliver Peter, he has to first awaken him from his deep sleep. In the midst of all of his trouble, knowing that he faced death in the morning, the apostle was in a deep, calm sleep. To wake him, he had to strike him in his side. And then he, like some confused child, had to tell him, get up and put your clothes on. Put on your shoes, put on your cloak. Now come on and follow me. As Peter stood, his chains simply fell off, and he walked out of the cell. He walked down the hallway. Verse 10 says, and the gates opened of his own accord. Actually, the word is automate. That is, the gates open automatically. Psalms 126 records what it was like for Peter when he came to himself and found himself alone in the streets. It says, when the Lord brought back the captivity of Zion, we were like those who dream. And when Peter had come to himself, he said, now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and has delivered me from the hand of Herod, from the expectation of the Jewish people. I declare and decree today that God delivers. He is still in the delivering business. Give it up and give it to God, and he will deliver. God bless and keep you as I pray. And as always, should you have any questions, please feel free to inbox me.